In this HackerRank compare the triplets problem, you can see that we have a lot of instruction being passed in. So I'm just going to summarize it and you can read it on your own if you like. Basically, we have two users, Alice and Bob. These users are going to pass in values. So we have two lists being passed in. Now, a good example is this sample input and sample output here, where the first three being passed in are Alice's numbers and the next three are Bob's numbers. If Alice or Bob has a higher number than either the other person, then we are just going to award them a point. So we can see for this first one, 5 and 3, Alice's number is bigger, so they are given a point. They are going to reside in the 0th index of our return list. And Bob is going to lie in the first index of our return list. Now, this next one is 6 and 6, so that means they're even. No point is awarded. This next one, 7 and 10, Bob is bigger than Alice, so he's finally going to get a point, which is 1 right there. We have more explanation down here, some more sample input. This is another one where in this case, Alice has two numbers bigger than Bob, so she's going to get 2 points while Bob only gets 1. Now let's code for it. If you don't understand it, again, try to read through it. Might make a little bit more sense, but there's a lot of instruction here. So we can see we have a public static list integer. So we are going to want to return some list that we are going to make. I'm just going to call it list, and that means we have to create a list. So inside of here, we're going to make a new list. I'm going to do list is going to be an integer type. We're just going to call it list, and we'll set it equal to a new array list. And this is going to be of the same type, so it should just look like this. Now, from here, we are going to want to create our list to have 2 indexes. That way we can add values into it as their score increases. So let's do list.add, where we're going to have at the 0th index a 0. And then we're going to also do a list.add, where we have at the first index a 0 as well. So this is going to represent Alice, and this is going to represent Bob. After we have this set, we are going to want to do a for loop. In this for loop, because it's the same size, you can pick either or, it doesn't matter. We are going to want to run through the size of this. So we'll do int c is equal to 0, and we'll have c is less than our a dot size, and then we're going to have a c++. So this is just going to go through each value that's in our A and our B. We're not going to do a for each loop because we have 2 different lists that we're going through right here. So inside of here is where we're going to handle our cases, right? So if Alice's is bigger than Bob, so that's going to be if our A dot, and we'll have a get for our object class. We're going to pass in the current index because it is array list base. We have a.get 0. If it is, this shouldn't just be 0, because if it's at 0, it's always going to stay at 0. We need it to be incrementing with our for loop. So if a.get at c is greater than our b.get at c, then we are just going to want to increment the 0th index for Alice. So we are simply going to do a list.set this time, not add, because we're replacing our current value, 0th index. And now we're going to need kind of like a counter variable to increment this every single time. So let's come up here, and with Alice, we're going to have, I'll just call it int temp a for Alice. We'll set it equal to 1 originally, so that when we pass it in here, we are going to have a first value. And we can just do temp plus or temp a plus plus. That means it increments every single time we hit this. Otherwise, let's handle for Bob. So Bob is going to be something similar. We'll do int temp b is equal to 1. I have this else, and I just copy the if down here. All we need to do is change this to be where b, so for Bob, is greater than Alice. We're going to be inside of here, and we're going to change this to b++ and the index to 1. Because we're setting different indexes, it represents different scores. Now, if they are equal, nothing is going to happen. So this should be all for our code, and it passes all of our tests. So this is going to be the code that we would use in our solution class. It's going to call it public static void main. We have our throws exceptions. We have our buffer reader, which is kind of like a scanner. It's going to take input where we're reading and writing to an output path. So we have input stream and then our file writer. These are where we make our two lists that we're passing in. We can see we have A and we have B. And then we have our buffer writer where we're going to write into our buffer the result, and the result is of this right here. It is a list storing the result from our compare triplets. So that would be the code that's testing what we wrote out in here.